How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Stars of the Diamond. My name is Rhett, and today I'm actually going to start a new series that I had kind of been contemplating doing for a little while. And I'm still sort of in the exploratory phases of how I want to go about this. But for those of us that collect vintage cards, whether it be non-sports or sports cards, we refer back to the American card catalog quite a bit, or the ACC as it's known. And I kind of wanted to go over the American card catalog and just explain sort of how it's broken down. I anticipate this being a series of videos that I do over time to kind of highlight the different portions of it. So I don't want this first sort of introductory video to be too long. But this is my very well-loved copy of the American card catalog, and it's held together by tape because I refer to it quite a bit, even though it's a very simple book, okay? And this book was begun by Jefferson Burdick, and he really was a pioneer in starting to break down exactly how trading cards or trade cards or miscellaneous inserts or giveaways were collected. He attempted to standardize the way that we collect these, and it really did start a process that we continue to use. We all know cards as T206, for example, or N172 Old Judge cards, but understanding why they're called T cards or N cards or things like that, I think it's paramount to understanding how cards are broken down. And once you start looking at different aspects or different areas within card collecting, it really opened my eyes to new avenues or different types of cards that I didn't know ever existed before. So anyways, today I just kind of wanted to go over what the American card catalog is and how it's broken down. Again, so I kind of made some quick 3x5 cards. Now these are the major breakdowns as far as types of cards are concerned, and it can be pretty overwhelming. But it's pretty simple, and under each of these headings there's subgroups, okay? And so we won't go too far into that or anything like that, but we know some of the most important ones as T cards, for example. So understanding that a T card actually means 20th, that's what the T stands for. It does not stand for tobacco, it stands for 20th century tobacco, whereas N cards are called N for 19th century. But that's actually tricky because in the original American card catalog, Burdick actually collected and considered 19th century tobacco cards to be sort of the main collecting group, and they didn't even have a heading. So there wasn't actually an N designation in the original American card catalog. We've given that to them to distinguish them between 20th century tobacco and 19th century. And in reality, N cards in the original American card catalog were actually South American and Central American issues. So again, here's sort of our contents. And again, as you can kind of see, 20th century tobacco, we're given T. 19th century tobacco, if we go to page 42 here, they will not have actual designations on them. So you will see 19th century U.S. tobacco insert cards are not referred to as N1 or N28s or anything like that. They're actually just called Set 28, World's Champions. Again, we have given that N designation to them to distinguish them between T cards, which are 20th century tobacco cards, but that is not how they originally broke those down. And so those are kind of our two major ones. Then we also have E cards, which are early candy and gum, as opposed to R cards, which are recent candy and gum. So those are kind of our four major ones. But then we also have, D, which is bakery and bread, which doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense letter-wise, but it does because they were kind of running out of letters. and B was already taken up for blankets and rugs. So I'm just going to kind of go through this. This might be a little bit of a dry video for some people, but again, I think it's important to understand. So again, I might pause a couple times and kind of come back to the video. I'm not quite sure, but I'm just going to start at the beginning of the alphabet and go down and talk about some different issues. Okay, so the A designation in the American card catalog actually refers to tobacco albums. So it's very specific, and obviously A is for albums. And what those are is those were the premium albums, and I have a stack of them over here that I've collected over the years, and I may do a video at some point on some tobacco albums. But what these are is in the same package that you got. For example, this is a Birds of the Tropics from Allen and Ginter. And in the same product that you got in a little N5 card, you also got a little coupon. And if you sent in 50 or 100 of these coupons, you could get these albums. And they were really, really well done and highly prized by the people back in the day, because they featured within them really, really well-made versions of the cards themselves. This one I have to be careful with because there's no hinge, so I do not want to bend it too much. And so it features the entire set of, in this example, of the Birds of Tropics, you know, in well-done lithos with, you know, scenes of, you know, monkeys playing with birds and, you know, natives and, you know, scenes of, you know, from at that point far away lands that may not have been, you know, well traveled or as well documented as we have today. So to, you know, a young person in 1888 or whatever, this might as well have been Mars thinking about going to the actual tropics. And there's all different brands. You know, here's another Allen and Ginter one with the Poets in Smokeland. So it had poetry and, you know, different things within it. Here's one by Duke. And this is the Heroes of the Civil War with, you know, well done and extensive written histories of the different generals of the Civil War. And this has to do with their set of generals and, you know, the little booklets, as well as the honest long cut larger examples. And so well done, you know, some great scenes. There's the Battle of Gettysburg in the middle, but just a beautiful, beautiful album. And so that's what, and again, we've got some other ones here. We got Game Birds of America, Governors and the Coat of Arms. These are the actors and actresses. This is a Kinney album, as is this one. So this is, I guess I have two examples of this particular album, and this one's lost its ribbon, so that needs to be restrung. And here's another one. Certain brands are obviously much tougher to find than others, but here is the Homes of Our Favorite Poets, and some obviously modeling and everything on the front. But this is an album by Kimball. And inside, you know, some well-done pictures of the Hawthorne Mansion, Whittier's house, Shakespeare's birth house, Lord Byron, you know, people like that. So these are what are considered tobacco albums. So that is what is under the A designation. And B, or blankets, and I'll be getting up and kind of grabbing some things here and there. Are what we know as like the B18 blankets. You know, for example, these would be under the B category because they are actually made out of, you know, felt. And C cards are actually just T cards, but instead of being made in America or the United States, they're made in Canada. And then D cards are bakery and bread. E cards, early candy. F is food. That would be anything that isn't included in any other food category. So not candy, not bakery, not baking soda like Arm & Hammer cards, things like that. Not coffee or anything like that. So you get a lot of cereal, for example. Most cereal issues, if you got something on the back of a box of Cheerios or in a box of Cheerios, those would be F. If you had got something with a package of meat, so like Armour hot dogs, or you know, the meat issues from the 1950s that became very, very popular, those would be F, or food inserts. G's are banners and posters. And so, for example, I have one here that's super rare, and this is an uncatalogued one, but this is a banner. Actually, it's so big that I can't even fit it on here. This is a heavy cardboard poster made for the T230 set of World's Champion Athletes. And this is actually the only example of this particular poster that I've ever seen, and it's one of my favorite pieces that I have. You know, the only thing that would have made this greater is if they had decided to make a card of Jim Thorpe in the set, or if the card that they did make of Duke Kahanamoku was on this particular poster. But regardless, pretty awesome piece. But that would be what was considered a G, or banner, poster, etc. Now, H cards are what are considered trade cards. Now, trade cards are pretty much what we think of. So something that's not necessarily an insert card, but just a 19th century trade card album that has just filled with different things would be under the trade card designation. So usually these things were handed out. They tend to be a little bit older. They date back to like the 1870s, 1880s, but not as many people collect H cards now as they kind of used to. That used to be a really, really popular one. Now, J cards are soda cards. Those are Church and Dwight, Arm & Hammer baking soda, Dwight soda, things like that. There are some other brands there with it under that same designation, but for the most part, J cards are exactly that. Now, K are coffee cards, and those are, your Arbuckle coffee cards, your McLaughlin cards, things of that nature. And those we can probably do another entire video on. L, leathers, means literally that, something made out of leather. Now, it became popular in the 19th century or early 20th century after T cards kind of had their heyday. Right at that point, about 1912, 1913, 14, leathers and silks and blankets became sort of the flavor of the time. And instead of just having cards in there, people would insert silks and blankets or leathers. You could do stuff with them foreseeably. And again, the original N cards were actually for Central and South America, whereas P are pinbacks. And I'm going to go grab my little pins. So, for example, here is, it's not something that I've collected an absolute ton of, but here are some P2 Sweet Capital baseball pins. And I kind of just collect these if they're in pretty decent shape and everything. But again, these are under the P designation for pinback. And there's sort of subheadings underneath that P designation. But again, we will not get into that today. Q, stereo views. Very few people have ever actually tried to sit down and I don't think Burdick even did it really, categorize stereo views. They're so widespread. And, it's very similar to like postcards, for example. They actually did attempt to designate postcards within the American card catalog, but they only got so far. And so R is for recent gum and candy. S is silks, pretty self-explanatory. T, 20th century tobacco, we've already talked about that. That kind of leads us down into the bottom category. And the next few designations Oh, actually, V are Canadian tobacco or Canadian candy. So what would be considered E cards and R cards in the United States, if they have a Canadian manufacturer, they are V. And Z are paper dolls. And again, another one of those categories like stereo views where, yeah, they're designated, but I don't think there's ever really been an attempt to understand exactly what those are. So I'm going to pause the video for just a second here, and then we're going to talk a little bit about U's, W's, and Y's. Okay, because those are three categories that basically just are garbage categories. And they just include a bunch of other stuff that weren't covered in any of the other designations. All right, so I'm back, and we're just going to talk about, again, those last three categories that we had referred to: the U category, the W category, and the Y category. So we're going to start with U, and I'm just going to kind of show you exactly what is in the book here. So the U category here are what are considered match folders and miscellaneous. And so this section covers all insert types not previously listed, such as match folders and boxes, theater giveouts, gas and oil, weighing machines, and other miscellaneous. These items required a purchase or expenditure to obtain and were not intended by the supplier to be given away as advertising or souvenirs. And it's, again, kind of a garbage category, but there are people that collect these quite a bit. But one of the big things within this group are the matchbook covers. And obviously there are people that collect matchbooks, but I don't know that category super well to know exactly how far they've gotten into categorizing different things. But obviously the things like the diamond matchbook, sports, matches are obviously highly collected, and they're included in here. So you've got your silver border 1934 diamond matchbooks, football guys, hockey players, all different things kind of going on. And Matchbox labels, theater issues, those are cards that are designated as UT for unclassified theater. And those, I have quite a few of them, but they are things that you would go to like a Kinema or Sequoia Theater or something like that, and they would be handing out, and you'd get a picture of like a Mary Pickford or William Hart or something like that, or Barry Moore's, or just people of that time period, the Lillian Gishes of the world. And you would Max Sennett is another one. Then you have also oil and gasoline, so that includes a lot of sports items actually. And you have a lot of PCL issues and things like that. So the Sohio, or the Standard Oil of Ohio, gave out things for the Cleveland Indians. And there's lots of things there. Weighing machines are UWs. And, then there's other miscellaneous. And so that's what kind of the U category is. You usually had to purchase something like fill up with gasoline, or you were buying matches and this was with it. But they were kind of superfluous. You were going to buy that product anyways. So that's kind of what a U category is. We'll go over sort of the Y category now. Now this one is a minor card types. Okay. Now this is really, really a garbage designation. So these are things that basically at the point that the American Card Catalog was produced, really Burdick had taken no effort to designate or break these groups down further than just calling them, hey, there are people that collect these, okay? And so they get super duper broad in their categories. And so, for example, this minor types or Ys include rewards of merit, tokens of affection, name cards, all those thousands and thousands of name cards that you gave to each other in the 1870s and the 1880s are actually included in the American Card Catalog. And here he just kind of designated them as single card, hidden name, exposition, celebrities, that kind of stuff. So just gave them a wide range of values and things like that. Bible cards, which oftentimes had a picture of like Moses, and then it would have a scriptural reference, or a picture of Jesus, healing lepers and giving the reference in the book of Matthew as to where that took place. So Bible cards are another one. Scrap pictures, so those are the scraps, that are always in those 19th century tobacco or 19th century scrap albums. And these are things that were produced as scraps. So like RNS Artistic Series baseball players would be part of these scrap pictures. And then we have miscellaneous Americana. So this really starts getting weird and broad. So books, book plates, bookmarks, documents, periodicals, early magazines, envelopes, business stationery, paintings and prints, sheet music, securities, menus, and labels. So when Burdick was producing the American card catalog, he really was it was a start off point, and he knew he was never going to finish it. But this last category, the Y category, was really just hey, these are things that people might collect someday, so here's a designation for those. But no attempt really was, made by this book to break them down any further. Okay, so let's talk about the W cards. Now, W cards are, within the baseball world, we think of W cards as being quote unquote strip cards. And that is only a small portion of, what are actually in the W series. So the W series is just album cards. And that's what they're referred to as, in the American card catalog. And it's kind of just these are distinct categories of things that people collect. So the beginning of the W series are the Prang album cards. Now, Prang was probably the earliest producer of trade cards that were made and sold usually in sets or even as singles by stationary dealers or dealers around the country, and they were made to be collected, and they really started the entire trade card craze. And so back in the day of the American card catalog, you can see the values that were given to Prang cards were actually extremely high, $2, $1 a piece. Whereas a T206 card, I think, is listed for 2 pennies in here. And so these were really highly collected, and not as many people collect them today, but they are actually really, really well done, cards, and you can still find them. If you can find them today, they usually don't set you back too much. There are people that are really adamant about collecting those, and they go pretty hard after rare ones. So any W series under the number 100 are Prang cards. We have other early album cards. These are made by other people like Buford and people like that. And again, there's some attempt to break those down, but not a lot. Okay, so then larger album cards are the 200 series within the Ws. And then recent album cards are given the 400 numbers. Now, what we think of them as are the Exhibit series. So probably a lot of people don't even realize that the Exhibit Supply Company, those sets are in the American card catalog as W400 series. Now, the W500s are trading or strip cards. So strip cards, it's not just because something is a W500 or W50 whatever, doesn't mean that it was a strip card. Okay, these are trading groups. So within this are exactly what we think of as, strip cards, W501s or, W516s or W555s, the little black border cards. But there are also, cards like W502s that they make no mention that these came in strips or anything like that. So just because something's a W500 does not necessarily mean it is a strip card. Okay, that means just that it is a you know, a trading or strip card series from that vintage. Now, W600 series are general issues. Okay, so again, this is just a miscellaneous. So for the example, we have W600 are the Sporting Life cabinets. And W601 are the Sporting Life team composites. And, you know, then in that same category, you have baseball miniatures from the Sports Exchange from the 1940s. And so it really just is a grouping of miscellaneous things. And that's what we get in our W600 series. And then we have, you know, W700 are baseball, football, sports club issues. And so these are what we would consider to be team issues. Now, a lot of people don't really even know or realize that these issues are categorized. They're you know, so for example, if you got a Brooklyn Dodgers team photo pack, for example, from 1943, that would be a W706 Brooklyn Dodgers team. And there are different things kind of categorized in that group. And so the W700s are baseball. W800s are football. W850 plus are other sports. So we've got basketball and hockey and things like that. And again, the American card catalog was always intended to be a living, breathing book or document. It was never intended by Burdick or anybody in that was involved in this to be a stagnant, standalone tome that was never to be added onto. It's not the Bible, okay? And so we know that because, you know, some of these categories are broken down in a very logical sense. You know, for example, and, you know, I'm going to kind of wrap up this video again. This is just an introductory video to the American Card Catalog. I think I'm just going to make this a series where I go a little bit more in depth into the different categories, and I can kind of show my type collection and things like that, because it really does open up a lot of avenues. Every time I pick up the American Card Catalog and I start reading about a new card type, I want to collect it, and that's just my personality. So I know other people are like that out there, so that's why kind of understanding what this book is all about really helps us in our collecting, and it can open up new avenues to enjoy your collecting even more. But so for example, I was getting at how these cards were broken down and how Burdick intended this to be a living, breathing document. So we have 19th century, or what we call end cards. Okay, so the first 67 numbers in the end series are all broken down, and they're all Allen and Ginter issues. So the way 19th century cards are broken down, or end cards, is they're by brand. So we have Allen and Ginter first, then we have the Duke issues next, and then after the Duke issues we have I think Goodwin issues, and then after Goodwin comes Kimball, and after Kimball comes Kinney, and after Kinney comes Buckner, and you know, other groups just like that. And then you have the Thomas Hall series, the Between the Acts series, and then so the major brands are the first, you know, 350 or so numbers, and then after that it starts breaking them down into minor manufacturers. But if you look at like the Allen and Ginter issues, for example, he goes down and we start at N1 and we go all the way down to N34. These are all small size. Then as soon as we get to 35, we get large cards. And then as we get to 45, we're at photos. So actual photographs. And so then we get into special issues, basically the other things that didn't fit into those other categories. And that goes all the way up to number 67, which are very, very hard to find. Then we start Duke issues, and the Duke doesn't start right at number 68, okay? So what happens is that they start at number 70, so he left a little bit of space in 68 and 69 so that if there were other Allen and Ginter issues discovered, that they could be added into this listing. Same thing with Duke. So Duke has the small issues here at the beginning. So N70 all the way to the N92, and skips a number, and then it goes to N94 all the way to N142. Again, skips some numbers, and that's leaving space for different things to be added. Then we've got the real photos, so actual photo like girly cards or whatever the case may be. Start at N145 and go all the way to, that's the end of it, 158. But they don't start the Goodwin issues right at N159. Nope. They start the Goodwin issues at 162. So 162 is the first Goodwin issue. And they go from N62 to N175, again, leaving 5 spaces before they get into Kimball, knowing that there's probably some other Goodwin issues that may be added later, so let's leave some space. Kimball's N180 to 190. And, those are the small ones, then large cards. And again, we kind of get into Lorillard is the next big group there. Then we get into Gale and Axe, which is also kind of a subsidiary of Duke, so they're always actually grouped together. Then we get into Buckner issues. Then we get into SF Hess. And then we get into Thomas Hall, and we missed our Mayos over there. And then we start getting into very, very minor manufacturers here, where they only made 2 or 3 different sets, things like that. And then at the end, you get into very, very minor manufacturers that maybe we don't know much about. But this was meant to be a breathing, living document. And I think that's necessary. Again, we've discovered with the internet and with the ability to share information so much that I think it's doing a disservice to not add to the American card catalog. The problem with that is that there needs to be a centralized group that can organize it and give it an air of legitimacy for it to be accepted within the hobby, because that needs to happen as well. You can't have multiple different groups all just designating this new set as the N161 set, okay? Because that's not going to take place. No one's going to accept that unless it's centralized. But anyways, so that's sort of my intro to the American card catalog. And again, I'm probably going to make this a little bit of a series that I do every once in a while, where we just kind of break down maybe a group and we talk about maybe the types from that issue. I don't collect everything. I have quite a few from different things. I don't collect a lot of coffee cards, for example. I don't have an extensive collection of those, but I have almost every soda card ever made. So that could be a video. But if there's one that you would like to see before any of the others, let me know. Again, this is going to be a work in progress. Basically, there's so much information to be covered that covering it on a YouTube video would take days and hours. We're talking Ken Burns type length here. And I don't want to get into that right now. But thank you so much for coming to Stars of the Diamond and bearing with me during that video. Again, probably a little bit of a dry video for those that aren't super duper into, vintage cards and the real minutia of collecting. But if you enjoy my videos, think about subscribing and liking, and again, hit that notification bell so that you get notified when I upload new videos. And if you have comments or you would like, I love feedback. If you have some feedback for me, let me know in the comments below. I do read my comments and I will respond to you. And collecting is here to be fun. It's a way to organize, our lives, and it really does bring order to ourselves. And that's what collecting has done for me. It is enjoyable to organize things. And I think that's just part of the human condition. And thank you so much for bearing with me during this video. And as always, everybody, happy collecting.